Do you want to reintroduce yourself? I know you've already been on a podcast before, but do you want to give a good introduction to listeners of who you are again?
For sure. My name's Lydia. My TikTok is at the confident woman. I think the dot confident woman. I'm 29. I have ADHD. I post content around my journey with ADHD, and more recently, I've also been talking about my journey with sobriety as well. And yeah, so I'm just on this journey through my life at the moment, living with ADHD, finding my way through it and dealing with those challenges and trying to talk about it and share it with other people and connecting with other people who are on similar journeys or within the neurodivergent umbrella. That's what I'm passionate about, really.
The reason why again you back on this podcast is just to reflect on that journey and what been on exploring parts of your ADHD as well as getting to know and understand yourself a lot more, because it seems like in the past year you've done a lot of learning about who you want to be, what makes you happy, and what type of life you want to live.
I think life can change at such a rapid pace. I was diagnosed with ADHD. Obviously, I was late diagnosed. I'm a girl. It's just the tale as old as time. I think I was diagnosed in May 2021, if I remember correctly. Last time I was on here, we spoke about the fact that I was actually misdiagnosed in lockdown, April 2020, with bipolar disorder, which I was then undiagnosed with and re-diagnosed with the ADHD. When I got diagnosed with the ADHD, initially the feeling that I had, and I was talking to somebody about this the other, was relief. I think if you're misdiagnosed and the diagnosis doesn't feel right, and I'd had issues with the medication as well, when you're diagnosed with something that does feel right, there is this enormous sense of relief. You start to find your community and you start finding your place. However, what I found happened really soon after that was I had an enormous identity crisis. There's this feeling of, oh, when you've got a label or a diagnosis, oh, there's something wrong with me. And I suppose there's also your own internalized stigma against mental health and disability. I think that if you're honest, everybody has some level of internalized stigma or ableism that you're not, it's unconscious bias, isn't it? You're not even really aware of it. And then all of a sudden you're very confronted with it applying to you. And so for me, there was a huge journey of accepting that about myself, broadening my kind of perspective on mental health and disability generally. But yeah, I had an enormous crash, and that really lasted quite a long time. I had a really challenging, say, 2 or 3 years. And then at the beginning of this year, everything really started to change. This year has also been a difficult year. But the amount of personal growth I've had has actually been staggering. And it really does go to show how much change you can make in quite a short period of time. I say it's pretty much been like 9 months of really rapid kind of personal growth and change this year.
Well, you explained before, I guess, at the point of diagnosis and the months thereafter, that period, you kind of going forward that thing of you already understand like some of the traits of ADHD, but not exactly what it looks like, because it takes a while to go through that path of looking at how we can present in everyday life. You late diagnosed, and you went through a period thinking it was bipolar and exploring that. Then that kind of does explain that it does take a lot for you to have that period of learning about yourself and learning what ADHD and how it presents itself. And so looking at this journey you started with ADHD and you started to explore a lot more this year, what have been the things that you've learned along the way, your ADHD traits or how ADHD affects you?
That's the thing. When you get diagnosed, and you go and you do your research and you go, okay, so this is an ADHD symptom. So impulsivity is an ADHD symptom, lack of focus or inability to focus on things that don't particularly interest you, etc. And then you go, okay, I understand all of that and I can see some of that in myself. but then actually trying to really see how it impacts your life and how intertwined with your personality is, because at the end of the day it is who you are. And I think that was part of my identity crisis, really, was, oh, what's me and what's ADHD, when in actual fact all of it really is me. What I really discovered this year, in terms of starting to sort of understand myself more and see what the impacts were on me and how I was living with my ADHD, one of the really big things that I really tackled this year was self-medicating, which I think is a huge problem for people with ADHD. I can't actually remember that there's a statistic about people with ADHD and substance abuse. For example, people who have ADHD are significantly more likely to try substances from a much younger age than like our neurotypical counterparts, and to then subsequently form like dependencies on it. So for me, even though I had been diagnosed and I'd started treatment, I'd had so much of my life already dealing with it by myself that I had developed some unhealthy coping mechanisms and ways of treating it myself that I hadn't necessarily identified as me trying to treat myself, if that makes sense, because
Yeah.
it's a subconscious. So I think this year particularly, that was something that I started to understand about myself and recognize, and then started to tackle, which isn't a clean, perfect, pretty journey for anybody. Anybody that's struggled with that will understand it's a horrible process to go through. But then the other things as well that's happened this year in terms of my ADHD, I hit burnout around about the time I got my diagnosis and ended up leaving my job. I had a very good corporate job, 9 to 5 in the office, senior role. And the way that I had been living up until that point, I was burning the candle at both ends. I was probably most definitely a workaholic, working all the hours, and then distracting myself in the evening by partying or just doing things that weren't very good for my health. So I hit a real brick wall with that, where I had to stop. And so this year, I went back into the workplace, back into an office environment, back into a corporate role, with amazing skills that I've learned in this period in between. I handled my anxiety so much better. I think I handled the work-life balance much better. However, I really recognized in myself how much that office environment and that corporate structure does not suit me. I am not a natural office dweller. I love the socializing. That's one thing I love about it. I love seeing people in the day. But the way that my brain works just does not fit into that box. I need a very particular environment, a very particular structure, very particular support. And instead of feeling ashamed about that, at this stage, with everything that I've learned over the past few years, I actually felt very empowered. I trust my gut a lot more now. I ended up leaving that job. It wasn't right for me. And I thought, okay, I'm going back to the drawing board. I'm going to find a place where I fit in. So I think it's all of those sorts of things in terms of how my ADHD affects me. I've always been very career focused. I've always wanted to work for myself, actually. But those things, when you are neurodivergent or ADHD, it takes so much more than just going, yeah, I'm going to go and do this. You've got to find the right environment. You've got to surround yourself with the right people. You've got to really understand yourself. And hey, I'm not claiming that I fully understand myself. I've still got a lot to learn.
In life, we're always on a constant path to understand ourselves and finding out a lot more about ourselves. As when you think about it, we always change and evolve over time, naturally. And as you were saying then about like substance use, it's something that that people may be familiar with, that certain celebrities or certain things they hear in the news or online about like people with ADHD. It might be a common thing they might hear about, but I know it's something very stigmatized in terms of like how it can affect neurodivergent people. And as I said, for those who also might be like correctly diagnosed with bipolar or other health conditions. So how was it? How did it take for you to learn that issues with addiction was linked to your ADHD?
I think it took me a while to figure out that was a big part of the reasons to why I was struggling with it so much. Obviously, there has recently been a lot of discussion in the media about substance abuse and issues of mental health, particularly with celebrities. And we do see it and we do talk about it, but there is still so much shame attached to it. And I think one of the really difficult things is being able to recognize when you're unable to moderate something. So, a lot of people, for example, go out to the pub every now and again, have a pint, and it's no big deal. And then there's other people who can't do that, and it's an everyday thing, or it might not even be an everyday thing. It can be the inability to moderate. People do have an idea in their head of what addiction looks like. And nobody really wants to apply that stigma and shame to themselves, which can prevent people from getting support in the first place. So I think for me, in terms of recognizing it was an issue for me, actually happened Christmas last year. I was having a really difficult time with it. And I started to think, oh, I'm not enjoying myself anymore. This isn't really helping me. This is actually making me really unwell. This doesn't feel good. And then I grappled with trying to stop at like the beginning of the year. That didn't work. And then the scenario that made me realize was I went into a situation that makes me quite stressed and out of my comfort zone. And I basically spiraled for about 7 weeks. And in that time, I'd actually been lying to my therapist, saying I'm not taking. Am I allowed to say what it was
Yeah,
that I
you
was?
can say,
Okay. Yeah. At that point, I've struggled with like various things over my life, but predominantly for me, it was is marijuana. That was the thing that really stayed the longest. It was the last thing really for me to be able to let go. And there are plenty of reasons why that particular substance is used by people who are ADHD or neurodivergent. And it's because essentially what it does is it relaxes you. There are loads of other really negative side effects, but just talking about the reason I think why this is so problematic for people within our community is because it shuts your brain down. So if you've got a very rapid firing brain, you suffer with anxiety, that particular substance closes the curtains on your brain. You can relax, you can stop, you can sit still. However, it also makes your anxiety worse. It makes you depressed. I had this basically 7 week, I'm going to call it a relapse, although I hadn't really stopped properly before. But the reason I'm referring it in that way is because it basically was so bad that I was doing it all day, every day, nonstop. I couldn't wake up in the morning without thinking like I needed it in order to cope with my day, to be able to get up and function. And I wasn't functioning, completely out of it. I wasn't getting anything done. I was sedating myself. But the sedation wasn't even helping. I was incredibly paranoid. I thought there was cameras watching me. It can almost mirror psychosis sometimes. And I was lying to my therapist at the time saying, yeah, I've quit, and masking that I was struggling so much. Anyway, the end of this 7 week period, I was basically in crisis with it, where the anxiety, the paranoia, the depression, my mental health was really at crisis point. And I had a call with my therapist and I said, I've lied. I've been struggling with it this whole time. She was aware it was a problem, had been saying like, yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And I will never forget that call because she was so disappointed. I am so lucky. I have an amazing therapist. We have a great relationship. And she said to me, she said, I'm really disappointed. I feel like the trust between us is broken, that you've hidden this from me. And this had been an ongoing issue. And I had been aware that it was a problem. It was getting in the way of everything. I didn't want to socialize because I wanted to go home and do that. I didn't want to leave the house. It was everything in my life revolved around that. And it had just gotten progressively worse. So I was really hit by this. I felt hurt. She didn't shame me. I didn't feel shamed by her. I felt hurt that I had broken the trust with my therapist, who is wonderful. And at that point, she said to me, I think this is really serious. And I think you need to go to meetings, which I had a bit of a mixed reaction to. On the one hand, we'd spoken about meetings before and I'd brushed it off and thought, yeah, that's not something that I need to do. So I was a bit like, oh, yeah, I don't know if meetings is the right place for me. Addiction meetings, I think that seems a bit extreme. Like, obviously, I'm not an addict or anything. But then on the other hand, I thought, Lydia, you're at a point where you can't stop. You can't stop, and it's getting worse and worse. You're lying to people, your mental health is dreadful, your money is just going entirely on this one thing. It's the only way you know how to connect with other people. It's the only way you know how to manage your mental health, quotation marks. And I think at that point, I realized that I was in a very toxic relationship with a substance that I was using as the only tool I really had to try and help myself. And it had essentially, the substance had turned on me and it was no longer helping me in the way it had before. I couldn't moderate it. And that was the point at which I was like, oh, I've been self-medicating here. This is a problem. And that's when everything turned around. At that point, I realized this is really bad.
It's that thing that I can understand how you may have been less incentivized or didn't feel like you might want to go to a group meeting. This is an important subject that does need to be talked about, but I think difficult for people who are addicts and need help, and anybody who's going through that addiction, is that there's a lot of taboo in society and there's too much stigma, and it's just that kind of decades-old thing that feels quite uncertain to how it impacts people's health, to just see it as drugs are bad, and that doesn't actually reflect on the impact of treating this as a health issue, as addiction and use of substance.
One of the first things when it comes to addiction is actually saying, yeah, I'm an addict. And anyone that goes to an addiction recovery group for the first time, it is like the movies. People do start off by saying, hi, my name is whatever, or I'm an addict, or I'm an alcoholic, or whatever. And I think that can be quite confronting for people. The first step is admitting that you have a problem. And that can be a massive hang up and a hold up for most people. It was for me. I wasn't ready to say it when I first went. I didn't really think it applied to me. But what I will say is that when I went to my first meeting, and I started online meetings first, and I won't specify like which meetings I was going to, there's loads out there. 12-step recovery groups are what you want to look for if this is something that affects you. What I would say though is that what you're imagining is so not what it is. I was expecting, and again, this all comes back to stigma and shame and all of that. I was expecting to turn up to one of these meetings and everybody to look ill, shabby, unwashed. If I'm being completely honest, I was expecting it to be homeless people. I don't know why. It was a fear within me. It was what I was expecting. I thought, this is the level I'm at. This is, as soon as you attend an addiction recovery meeting, you realize how many ordinary, normal people, not that they're not ordinary, normal people from every area of life. You've got people from very successful business owners, ordinary office workers, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, everyone you can imagine. Look at me. I go, and I'm one of the people that's there, and I am no different from everybody else. But there is such a broad spectrum of people that go to these. And it is the most beautiful and unifying experience where people do just open up and you don't have to share. In fact, I think you're not really supposed to, I think, your first time, just because you should go and feel it out and whatever. The people that are there are whole, lovely, wonderful, brave people that have gone through hell and back. And some people have really been through the runner with various addictions. And actually to sit in a room with people, it actually almost makes me emotional to talk about it, but to sit in a room full of people who have suffered with this illness, because it is an illness, and we need to remember that, I think. Suffered with this illness and brought themselves back and made this enormous change in their lives, and then gone on to be successful human beings, however they define that themselves in their own life. There is something so moving. It's actually sending shivers through me to even think about the things I've heard in those groups. And they're so protected, they're so safe. There's this whole anonymity thing. when you go, whatever you say, whatever you hear, that stays there. And in those groups of people, if you were to go in, for example, and see someone that you knew, which has happened to me, that was my biggest fear, you completely respect that you're both there for the same reason. And it's actually really nice to bump into people if that does happen. So don't be like afraid of that either. Like you'll be thinking, oh my God, I never realized that because everybody thinks that addiction is visible, but it's not. It's so many other things.
It's that thing of overcoming that negative feelings you have about how you might be judging yourself, how that can be like a big thing of walking into the room. But as you said, the thing about seeing other people without you recognised or seeing another person is that at least you know that there shouldn't be any shame attached, or you've both gone through something very similar, and that would be like an issue like that. And I think it's like that worry of walking into a room shows how further we need to go as a society of understanding addiction as an illness, and actually it does happen, and actually encourage people to be able to go seek out help. As I know, there is a lot of issues as well, because it is an issue that does affect people who are self-medicating for conditions who you haven't been able to get either diagnosis for or proper support for.
I think when you enter those spaces, I remember walking in a bit late once to an early meeting when I started going to the in-person meetings, and I said, sorry, ADHD moment. And somebody there basically looked at me and said, hey, you're in good company, welcome home. And oh my God, even remembering that now makes me want to cry. I don't want to sob. But actually, I just realized, like, wow, I'm in a community of my people here that understand me. Oh, that's actually hit me just remembering that. And just how we recognize that ADHD, autism, bipolar, BPD, list goes on, are, you do not, how do I word it? Things that people struggle with that are out of their control. The same applies to addiction. Addiction is not something that people can help. It's a part of your makeup. There are genetic influences, social influences, and also I really want to mention is specific substance stigma. And I really feel passionately about getting this across as well. People will say, oh, you can't get addicted to that, or oh, only this sort of substance is addictive. Now, me, I've struggled with a variety of substances like throughout my life in various phases, and for me, marijuana was just the one that I really couldn't put down at the end of the day. It was my last sort of really difficult thing to let go of. But the amount of people that will say, oh, you can't get addicted to weed, you can't get addicted to smoking marijuana. I just want to say for anyone watching, you can get addicted to anything. It's not about the substance itself. It's about what it makes you feel, what void it's filling in you. You can get addicted to food, to sugar, to gambling, to adult videos on the internet. I say you can get addicted to anything. Exercise can be addictive. People can attach their addictive nature or needs onto any kind of substance or anything that gives them some kind of emotional plaster, band-aid, whatever you want to call it. So if you go online and search up for addiction meetings, addiction recovery groups, you will find Overeaters Anonymous, you will find Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. There are kinds of addiction groups for the various different addictions that you can have. And it really does bother me, not for myself, because I'm quite comfortable in my experience and knowing how I felt and what my experience was that I was addicted and how much trouble it caused me. But I know for a lot of people seeking recovery, they may feel ashamed that their addiction isn't bad enough, or the substance they're addicted to isn't bad enough, or there's almost a shame of your addiction not being good enough in a way sometimes. And even if you do attend meetings, you will hear people that have been through things that you haven't, and sometimes it can make you think, oh God, some people have it so much worse than me, like maybe I shouldn't be here because I haven't had that experience. But what they will say to you in like recovery meetings is, listen for the similarities, not the differences. Find that connection with other people, and also be grateful for for having not reached a certain point. But yeah, in terms of acknowledging that it's an addiction and moving forwards with that, and that's shame and stigma surrounding it. The shame and stigma is not just around being an addict, it can be around what you're addicted to and how that affects your life. And some addictions can have more outward or visible consequences, for example. So having an alcohol addiction can present very differently to a marijuana addiction or a cocaine addiction or a gambling addiction or a sugar addiction. They all present very differently within people and have a different set of consequences. But I think the important thing is acknowledging that. And I want to say as well, actually, I have an amazing therapist, I have an amazing doctor, I've had some amazing support since being diagnosed. The up there with the best support I've had, the most life-changing support I've had, the thing that has turned my life around the most since that, or ever actually, has been these meetings and has been this process of change with how I medicate and treat myself. And that has primarily been through addiction recovery groups, which I also want to add are essentially free. You can make a donation when you're there. I'm talking like £1 each time, which if you compare that to the price of therapy, if you have to go private with therapy, I mean, it's income. So my life in the last 9 months has been changed in the most part by attending these groups and becoming substance free. And I'm so proud of it. But I know that resource has been huge. And I really want to spread the word of that in a way, just because it's made such a big difference for me. And even if people aren't ready to maybe go to groups or seek therapy about things in their life, I suppose the core of it is acknowledging the really big problems in your life and starting to make change one step at a time. It has a huge impact in a relatively short space of time. 9 months, if you think about 9 months ahead of time, you think, oh gosh, that's a really long time. But looking back on it, it's not a long time, and everything in my life has changed. Everything.
As said, sometimes it doesn't feel a long time because it's quite quick. The months go by, and even though from trying to come off a substance or trying to do sobriety, that in itself might make time feel a lot longer. One thing on this subject I want to ask is, when a state of like how we approach things in the United Kingdom in terms of substance use treatment, how we approach things in the United Kingdom in relation to substance uses compared to other countries more liberal in terms of decriminalization. What are your thoughts of how we approach things here in the UK?
Yeah, I love this question actually. And I don't think I have a fully solidified answer for it, but I do have an opinion. There is an amazing TED talk by Dr. Johan Hari. It's about addiction. He talks about how Portugal decriminalized drugs, how they had a huge issue with drugs in Portugal, and how drastically over the period of 15 years, how drastically the decriminalization of drugs affected their society for the better. I think my opinion on this has changed over time. So when I was in active addiction, when I was a heavy smoker, I thought, yeah, legalize it. And that was more because I thought, I'd rather walk into a shop and there'd be like less shame around it. And then as I was recovering, I thought, oh my God, legalization would be dreadful. I had some friends over in the States who were on the same kind of process of me, of trying to stop. The States and Canada, where you can just literally swan into a shop and swan out again with marijuana, basically. And I remember thinking, gosh, that's a real additional challenge that they've got. I'm not faced with, I don't smell it all the time when I'm out and about. You do, but not really to the same extent. And there aren't just shops everywhere that you can just walk into. There's a difference between legalization and regulation, whereby you would have shops where you can go in and purchase these things, and then decriminalization. So I think there's arguments for all of it. Part of me thinks that, number one, drugs should be completely decriminalized from the point of view of people taking them. There should be no criminal intervention for somebody that is addicted to drugs. I think that's completely wrong. It's quite clearly a health issue, a healthcare issue, mental health issue, physical health issue. There are services that people are directed down for addictions in the UK through our healthcare system. I haven't experienced that, so I'm not the right person to talk
Yeah.
to about that particular road. But I do know people that have, and I know that the people that I know that have gone through that found it ineffective, and some people that I'm no longer in contact with that I know are still in active addiction. So those services obviously didn't have a happy outcome for them. But so I think that the systems that we've got in place, although I don't have too much experience of the NHS way of dealing with
Yeah.
that, from what I've seen, I don't think they're sufficient or working. But 100% it should be decriminalized. That there's evidence you can go. That TED talk with Johan Hari is really interesting. But criminalizing drug taking, drug use does not work. It makes the situation worse. Portugal is a great example of seeing how decriminalizing drugs can change how the society functions, the percentage of the population that are addicted to drugs, how much that can really help. I think in Portugal, they were giving businesses incentives to hire recovered addicts and get people back into society, and it had a really great impact. Then coming on to the topic of legalization, which is different. So legalization would mean drugs are legal, regulated by the government, and you would be able to buy them in shops in the same way that you are able to walk into a supermarket and buy alcohol. I think there's this I haven't got a full opinion on yet. There are several parts to it. One, people will always consume substances. That's always happened. You look at prohibition times, for example, people were still drinking alcohol. As human beings, we're always going to do that. And to an extent, some substance use is not abuse. Some of it is in lots of cultures, you have like ayahuasca, it's connected to spirituality. I think a lot of people have that relationship with marijuana where it's almost a medicine that they can just take infrequently and feel something really positive from it. For me, that's not possible. For some people, substance use does not equal substance abuse. However, there are always going to be addicts in society because that's life. Addicts
Yeah.
exist. They are valid. That experience is real, and it's caused by a multitude of factors. If substances just didn't exist, for example, it would be sugar or love. It would be other things that would fill that void. But substances do exist. They always will exist. We can't get rid of them. The benefit to legalization is safety, being able to provide people with clean drugs, quote unquote clean drugs. So that is, street drugs are obviously often cut with really nasty kind of additives. I think people know that. Obviously, we know about the fentanyl crisis that's happening predominantly over in the States, where people are overdosing from fentanyl, being cut into their drugs. That sort of thing, that sort of tragic, disastrous outcome of having an unregulated drugs industry would be massively helped by drugs being regulated by the governments. So you wouldn't have that. You would also, I don't want to say eradicate crime, but so much crime is based around drugs trade that, that kind of
Yeah.
is the cornerstone of all crime. So there's that element to it as well. And I think overwhelmingly, really legalizing drugs. I think, what are they doing in Scotland at the moment? I was seeing the other day. It was about having places where you can. Now, don't quote me on this because
Yeah, I have heard about that. Not necessarily encouraging people to use, but having a safe consumption room where there would be medical intervention.
Trialing things like that. That is so important. People will go out and take party drugs. They're not addicts. They're going out, they're partying, they're taking something to enhance the experience. They're not going to become addicted. And some unlucky kid or just a random person could end up taking a drug that's been cut with something highly toxic that ends up killing them. And it's absolutely tragic. And I do think that people who are addicts, they're not bad people, they're not dirty people, they're not beneath anyone. They're people with an illness and they need to be protected too. And obviously, addicts are more likely to end up taking overdoses or horribly mixed drugs, substances that aren't clean, and ending up dying or with horrible outcomes, basically. We owe addicts just as much love, care, and support as we owe anybody else with any other kind of illness. In this country that we live in, we for the most part believe in healthcare as a human right. We have the National Health Service, God bless, and addicts and people who use drugs are just as entitled to that judgment-free healthcare and support as anybody else. I suppose the thing that holds me back on the legalization side of things is the access to it being, or it being more open in culture. But I think that's just a normal hesitation to have around it.
Yeah,
Because if you think about it, for example, without people who suffer with alcoholism, alcohol is in supermarkets. It's not hidden away. It's not locked up in a cupboard or anything. It's just on the shelves. You can just go pick it up and walk out. There's no one says to you before you buy a bottle of wine, are you an alcoholic? Should you be buying this? And yet people still manage to live in sobriety from alcohol for a very long time. So part of me thinks that if there were safe and easy ways to go and access clean drugs in a safe way, without also, by the way, exposing yourself to the danger of dealing with criminals, which is what you are doing when you go and buy illegal drugs, that although there's maybe more people would maybe try it than would if when it's illegal, I think overall probably it would be safer.
yeah, it is a complex issue and question to ask, but I just want to generally put out there. But it's like I do understand the concerns of like legalizing the laws on supermarket shelves and such, because I suppose if you look at the issue of alcoholism, you can buy high amounts of it at a time. Some pints of alcohol is sold in packs of six, and
Yeah, and also I think if they did legalize drugs, I don't think you're ever going to walk into a Sainsbury's and be able to buy
yeah,
marijuana.
I think that it's like, I guess some people are concerned with that, but I do think that, yeah, they probably won't be that case. And I think I do see with regulating it, it would at least provide a bit more safety, as you say. That safety is the biggest point of it, and being able to ensure that it is properly regulated fairly, and just to make sure there is a right to healthy relationship.
I think the first step would be to decriminalize it,
Yeah,
to not criminalize people who are addicts or that have drugs on them from a kind of personal use point of view. I think that would be the first step. And then working on helping addicts properly, helping them back into society. It would be much cheaper for us as a society, if that's what you're concerned about, to have people functioning and getting back into the world. And then I think the second step would be to look at legalization more generally. I don't think it's one of those things that you can just do all at once, but I think I wouldn't be opposed. I'm definitely on board with decriminalization. I think that's just unhelpful to everyone. It fills our prisons up. It costs us a lot of money as a taxpayer. And then I think following that, we would look at legalization. I'm really on board with that, but it's
yeah.
not a very politically popular stance.
It
People are
isn't, yeah,
wary of it.
very popular, but it's something that would need to be able to change.
Mm.
And yeah, if, like when you mentioned about what they do in Scotland, I just quickly looked up, and it's Safe Drugs Consumption. They started it in October of this year in Scotland. And yeah, when he was talking about what they're doing in
Yeah.
Scotland, his part just mentioned that. And yeah, so I want to go also quickly back to when you said about when you were seeing your psychiatrist and or therapist, Steve. You know, when I started admitting your addiction, what are the things that really helped you stop with start path to sobriety, and what has helped you mostly for maintaining sobriety?
That's a really interesting question. So when I spoke to my therapist and said, this has really gotten to a crisis point, that was the last day I ever touched it. I haven't touched it since. I believe it was the 28th of May, but I'll have to double check. It's been about 6 months. That day I spoke to her. After I spoke to her, I did have some, but that was it. That was the very last day. I think for me, there was a real strength of I'm in an awful place. I had a very strong feeling of I'm done now. And it wasn't easy. Anybody that's gone through recovery knows that withdrawal is, I went through, it took a long time actually of withdrawal. So, in terms of getting through that process and what helped me, number one, I felt a really strong sense at the time of wanting to prove to myself that I could do it, prove to myself that I could live without this thing. And I had a real strong sense of wanting to get to know myself as a sober person, as somebody with ADHD that hadn't really spent that much time sober, getting to know herself. So I felt very strong in my own sort of conviction with that. I also had a really great relationship with my therapist, and I wanted her to see that I cared about myself too, so that all the work that she was putting in with me wasn't just in vain, and that actually I cared about having a good life as well. So those were two kind of strong feelings that I had at the beginning of the process. Additionally to that, I started going to meetings. I think my first sober day, it was a Monday when I spoke to her. My first sober day was a Tuesday. And the first meeting I attended just so happened to be on a Wednesday. So I'd had this one day of day one sobriety without kind of doing anything, probably just thinking about stuff. Not a pleasant day. And after that, I got advised to go to at least one meeting every day for, can't remember whether they said 30 days or 90 days or something like that. It seemed really intimidating. It seemed like a really big commitment to make. And I didn't actually fully manage to do that, by the way. But the principle of it was brilliant, because what I ended up doing was I went to loads. At least for the first 3 weeks, I was going at least once a day. Quite often I'd go 2 or 3 times a day. Like I say, online ones. I didn't go to in-person meetings for ages. I started off like fully online. But what's amazing about that is that when you are using a substance, you are basically feeling disconnected from your life and from the world. And what those meetings do is they fill that connection void. So let's say for me, the worst time in the day was in the evening. That's when everything goes quiet. My brain gets really loud. I have to face my feelings and emotions and I can't cope. So at that time of day, I'd go to a meeting. They can be anything from an hour to 3 hours long. And I'd just be talking with people. And that would get rid of a huge chunk of time that was a really challenging period of time in the day for me. The other thing as well, especially with the 12-step programs, is that you focus one day at a time. So you don't think 2, 3 weeks, I'm going to do this, that, and the other. You go, no, today I'm not going to do it. That's all I'm promising myself is one 24-hour period. So it was that very presence of moment, attending the meetings, connecting with other people, massive, huge. Having a community, whether you're extroverted, introverted, ADHD, autistic, whatever, having a community of people, you will find someone that you connect with. And so, yeah, I shared that experience with other people, and that was major. Additionally, what else would I say really helped me? I think I tried to get back into life a little bit. So I tried to spend time with my friends, meet new people, socialize more, play sports and exercise, try to focus on being healthy. I've never been good at sitting down still and focusing on a film or a TV show. I'm so annoying. If ever I've had a boyfriend in the past, I'll talk all the way through. And I realized I was going to have to figure out how to be on my own, which was the crux of the issue for me anyway. And I think even harder for me this year, because with my therapist, we decided that I needed to be single. I'm a very codependent person. I've been in relationships consistently back to back since I was about 16. So that was another thing going on this year, which was a big thing for me to be going through. I was really suffering with feelings of loneliness. I'm a massive extrovert. I really crave constant social interaction. So I guess I was having to find ways of relaxing without this one thing that would just shut down my system, really. I learned to watch TV. That sounds really silly because I don't really love watching TV. But yeah, I got really stuck into some films and TV shows, audiobooks, podcasts, and I started to really, I think what happened through the process of doing this was that I actually got more focused and determined on what I wanted to do. Because when you're really focusing on not doing something, it's very hard to not do it because it's all you're thinking about.
Yeah.
So in a way, instead of thinking about, oh, I'm not smoking weed, you've got to think about, oh, I am watching TV. I'm going to watch this. I'm really into this series. I got really into Married at First Sight this year. Be really embarrassed about it. But I was like completely obsessed with it. And I think there's a line between making sure things are healthy and whatever, but finding other things that are healthy, working in a job that you enjoy, trying to read a book, trying to watch a film, exercising, focusing on your general health, loads of things, really, loads of things.
It's playing from we talked about before, of like what you recommended as when you was doing your confidence coach and you was talking about the dopamine. So I guess it was really going into the stuff that you would really be putting on dopamine and to put that into more practice again, because I guess it's for that thing that as an ADHD person you need is that something stimulating for the brain, something that can distract from anything of like thinking about your substance use and really think about having something to occupy your mind really. And because I guess that's the thing is, I guess for, to a extent as well as for it being like self-medicating in manner using like that, it must have been like as like when people talk about oral stims, it must have been quite stimulating for yourself.
Yeah. The dopamine, yeah, brilliant, remembered. The dopamine is fantastic. But what I would say is just for people that don't know, so dopamine is when you write out a list of things that give you dopamine so that so instead of getting bored or anxious in the evenings, not knowing what to do, you can refer to it and find something that you find interesting so you don't get stuck in that ADHD paralysis as well. I would say my dopamine has massively changed since I've become sober as well. My interests have changed and I'm learning who I am in a new context with that and what I enjoy.
It was like, as you say, you were talking about dopamine, that like basically like how your substance use marijuana was a custom thing, and I guess,
Stimming.
yeah, yeah.
I do have a lot to say about the sort of stimming element of stuff. So stimming has been such an interesting kind of journey for me, learning all about it and how I do it as well. So in terms of substance abuse, any kind of substance gives you an enormous hit of dopamine straight away. And it can actually, as my therapist so eloquently put it, absolutely bugger your pleasure receptors. And so when I first started taking medication for ADHD, I actually had a really bad reaction to stimulants the first time around. I took Ritalin. I have a tic disorder. It made my tics horrific. It was so bad I couldn't even drive. But it was like it triggered this huge tic outburst in me, and I just basically couldn't go anywhere because it was disabling, basically. And now I've actually just started trialing Vyvanse, which I'm keeping a record of on my TikTok in a very chaotic me way, not like every day. And I was expecting, so I said to my doctor, can I try stimulants again? And he said to me, you might find, because we completely avoided them after that, he said, you might well find now that you're sober that you have a completely different reaction. Because basically, when you're taking substances, you are flooding your system with dopamine. When I took Vyvanse for the first time the other day, I was terrified. I thought, oh my God, what if I have a major tic attack? I've had no tics. I can't believe it. I thought I'm on day 3 now, and I've had absolutely no tics on it at all, which is amazing. Obviously, I'm going to keep an eye out. Might not end up working for me, but the reaction feels completely different. Yeah, in terms of stimming as well, because I think I do stim in a lot of ways. I don't know if you do this, but do you like bold flavors and stuff in food?
Sometimes depends on the mood. It depends on whatever end up chucking in the pan, because some when I'm making food, I don't always have go by the same recipe or same thing at the time.
Yeah.
You can just chuck a bit of this and that in.
Yeah, because I'm obsessed with spicy food. I love really hot food. I'll eat chilies. I'll eat a chili like it's an apple. I love buffalo. My favorite food, my hyperfixation food that's really been the same for years now, which is actually not very ADHD of me. That's more kind of autistic safe foods, I feel like, because I could eat that all day, every day. It's buffalo fried chicken, spicy buffalo fried chicken with blue cheese sauce. So I'm getting distracted thinking about how much I love that. But I love fizzy sweets as well, like Tangfastics, cherries. And somebody told me, oh, fizzy drinks as well, sweet drinks. And somebody told me ages ago, oh, do you realize that's actually stimming? That's a form of stimming. Basically, like foods that have like a very strong, like
Yeah,
fizzy, sour. And I was like, wow, because I really like strong flavors. I love certain things that other people find gross, anchovies, like pickles, stuff like that. So yeah, I think stimming is a really interesting thought. And actually, I think I need to think about it more with myself because I think I do it more than I realize. I certainly do a lot of like physical stuff with my hands, which I think of as fidgeting. Because again, it's the same with the tics, really. My whole life, I never really paid attention to my tics because they were very mild and until they got really bad. And I was like, oh, I actually have no control over this. I just thought it was fidgeting, really. But I think when it comes to dimming and that sort of stuff, first of all, stimming can lead to behaviors that are harmful to yourself. Things like skin picking or like picking your lips, things like that can be quite harmful. I've never really thought about drug use in the form of stimming before. So now my brain's going off 100 miles an hour because I'm thinking, oh my God, is that stimming? But there's something, so I'm trying to quit vaping at the moment. It's not going very well. For me, I don't think it's the nicotine with vaping. I think it's the oral fixation. I think it's
yeah,
the comfort because the guy that I go to, the vape shop I go to, he always says to me, you never come here. Where else do you go? And I go, no, I don't go anywhere else. This is the only place. And he said, oh, you don't actually smoke a lot, do you? And you know what it is? I hold it in my hand. It's a comfort thing. And it's like having it like on my lips and stuff. So I think for us neurodivergent folks, there's so much around like sensory and comfort and
yeah,
stimming that's really a massive part of how we kind of function in the world that's really
yeah,
important to us. And actually finding ways to do that's not detrimental to us, because a lot of stimming is completely not detrimental,
yeah.
other than we can face judgment from other people. I'm a hyperactive person, and especially growing up, I'd get looked at funny. I used to skip everywhere. That makes me laugh now to think about that. When I was younger, I think that's really cute, but I'd get funny
Yeah.
looks. And I don't screw that, screw other people and their opinions. But in terms of stuff that actually can cause you pain or discomfort, where you want to maybe find ways.
I think we might have mentioned this before, like with like if you were as said you've got few autistic traits and from your tic disorders since you've been off and becoming sober, how has it changed how you perceived your neurodivergence in that way of like how you potentially would you potentially think that more autistic things are not or that or how have you noticed things with like your tics as said before about your Tourette symptoms?
Yeah, really interesting question. So much has changed since I've got sober, actually. And I think, as well, aside from the sobriety part of this, just that process of going through the few years after you get diagnosed, just starting to understand yourself and figure yourself out, you do start. One of the things for me that I think really formed like a major part of my identity crisis in the first place was starting to understand masking. I always understood the concept of masking, but it never clicked into my brain exactly how I mask, if that makes sense. When it did, when I suddenly, and it happened in an evening, I went to an amazing conference, not conference, it was like a talk about ADHD at Birmingham Glee Club. I can't remember the guy's name. He was brilliant. And I left that. I went with one of my friends actually. He's also ADHD. And I remember she was talking to me in the car and I wasn't listening to a word she said because I was screaming, crying, like just silently crying. Because I felt like I just understood how much I masked and how deeply ingrained in me it was and how uncomfortable and draining it had always been. Oh my God, it was such a revelation. But I think that in terms of figuring out who I am and seeing all of that sort of stuff, since being sober, one of the things I think that's really improved for me, for example, is that my depression is so much better. Yes, I do still have sad and blue days, and your life doesn't just become perfect when you get rid of it. We're all tempted to think that, oh, if I fix this one crappy part of my life, everything will be perfect. No, it's not, but I can see so much more clearly now. My depression is nowhere near what it was when I was using. My anxiety is nowhere near. It's not that I don't have these things anymore. I'm just so much better able to control them with the techniques that I've learned, but also they're not being massively exacerbated by consistent drug use. So there's that on the positive end of things. In terms of autistic traits, so there's this one's actually been a bit of a word I'm looking for, eye opener for me. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, that's such an eye. When I tell you what I'm about to say, you're going to laugh at me saying it's been an eye opener. Eye contact, right?
Yeah.
So this is something that I've realized really recently is I really struggle with eye contact. And you can see from talking to me, I'm really confident. I don't tend to struggle socially. I can talk to anyone. I love talking to people. Try and stop me. You probably tell because I just can't stop talking.
Yeah.
But eye contact for me, so I think with that sort of thing, I'm higher masking than like other people are that are more autistic leaning in this particular way. I can make eye contact,
Yeah.
but I struggle with it. I find it very difficult. So I'm doing it intentionally when I am doing it. I tend to focus on eye contact when I'm meeting somebody new or I'm trying to make a good impression, which in a way it's a privilege that I actually am able to mask in those situations because it does help with operating in a neurotypical world. But I don't want to do it. And when I'm with people that I'm comfortable with, I actually don't make eye contact with them very much. Certainly not for a bit. Like I might settle into it if I've been spending a lot of time with them. But for the most part, if I'm talking to someone, I even do it like now when we're on camera, like I need
Yeah.
to look away. Looking into people's eyes directly, it's uncomfortable for many reasons. I'll be thinking, honestly, my brain just goes, should I be looking in the left eye or the right eye? Because I read an article once that says you should look in the left eye only. And if I look at the forehead, can they tell that I'm looking at their forehead and not their eyes? And oh my gosh, I really struggle with blue eyes. I have blue eyes, by the way, but people who have blue eyes, particularly men with blue eyes, I genuinely believe people with blue eyes can read my mind. If I'm making eye contact with a man with very blue eyes, I'm thrown off. I can't do it. I'm like, no. Brown eyes. People with brown eyes are just brown eyes are so beautiful to me. Like they're so warm. And I think because they're dark and you can't see the pupil as clearly, but when people have light blue eyes, I don't know. And it's beautiful, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's not beautiful. Like blue eyes, lovely, but it's intense. And I say that as somebody with blue eyes. If I was talking to myself, I'd be like, whoa.
Yeah. I find that eye contact has been like a struggle for myself because I find if you can try and make direct eye contact, it can make you give you a bit of like headache feeling anyway. Or it's like the back of your eyes.
It feels intimate. I don't know.
Yeah.
Staring into someone's eyes that you don't know is, and to be honest with you, I have quite high social intelligence, really. I definitely, I'm very intuitive and I read people very well and I'm very good at connecting with people. And that's probably one of my blessings. And I love that about myself. And so when I'm meeting new people for the first time, I'm very aware of the power of eye contact and how to use it in a way. And I think this actually is ADHD thing. If I'm really invested in, because I love people, I love finding out about people. If I'm really invested in talking to someone and finding out about them, part of that connecting with them often is looking in their eyes. And so sometimes I'm not thinking about it because I'm so focused on the process of engaging with this person and connecting with them. And that's probably one of my special interests is other people and talking to other people and
Yeah.
getting to know people. I genuinely care about other people. And so sometimes I don't notice and I do it, I think in a way I'm doing it to put the other person at ease and to let them know that I'm listening to them and hearing them, if that makes sense. So sometimes it's easier than other times. And other times I'm definitely doing it for the benefit of the other person because I am right now, I'm looking off into the distance, like I'm fully here and present in the conversation that we're having, but I just find it easier not to be.
Yeah.
If I look at you, I might suddenly start thinking like, oh God, am I start worrying, am I talking too much? Have I said the wrong thing? What's he thinking, kind of a thing. Whereas if I look over here, I can gather my thoughts a bit, but I don't gather my thoughts very well, as you can tell.
And I just tend, when I'm doing podcasts anyway, I tend to just keep on, like, never really look too much at the screen. I just tend to write notes as I go along, so I know where I'm at and what to ask and all that, and kind of working my way through the interview, and just so I get. And is there any other ways that you would think that you're autistic or not?
Yeah. In fact, funnily enough, it was my mum that started pointing out autistic traits to me. My mum's always worked with children, with SEND children in preschool and school age. And so she's very familiar with it. But again, when it's your own child, it's harder to pick up on. And I think the thing, because I have high social skills, that can mask the autistic traits quite a lot, because that's the classic thing that people associate with autistic people. And I don't, present in that way. But yeah, for me, autistic traits that I have really noticed, and actually all of this has really I've become aware of in like probably the last 12 months. Routine. So I think of myself as a disorganized, chaotic ADHD, time blind, running on fumes, whatever. But I don't like change. So, for example, I've actually come away for a few days. I come to this place all the time. This is a very familiar, safe space for me. The process of packing, moving myself here really unsettles me. Being in a different environment, the change of environments really stresses me out. So I never really want to come here for super long periods of time, because it makes me feel very unsettled to be away from my environment.
Yeah.
So dog's snoring. And then so there's that kind of environmental change issues that I don't like. And then there's things like routines. I'm trying not to do this, but I go and get a coffee every day. I'm trying not to do it for several reasons. One, money. Two, caffeine's not very good with the meds I want to take. And three, money again. But getting a coffee for me every day, I can't explain why it's so important to me, but it's a real marker in my day. And one of the things that I've noticed that I really struggle with, and I'm actually only just coming into my power with this as well, and I'm going to say it with my chest. I hate Christmas. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm not a Scrooge. I always thought I loved Christmas. The lead up to Christmas, the excitement, singing along to Mariah Carey, the sparkles, the lights. I hate Christmas. And I think that I only realized that last year. I basically have a mental breakdown every time Christmas comes around each year. And I never anticipate it. And it happens every single year. And basically what happens is, I think the ADHD in me loves the lead up. Everybody's excited, everybody's going out and doing stuff. There's lots of things to go and do. There's all the different food, there's lights everywhere, that sort of excitement. When it comes to actual Christmas, I fall apart. Several reasons I'll explain really quickly. One, my routine is gone. On Christmas Day, everything is closed. I take myself away and go and get a coffee. That sounds so minor, but that was like the first thing that ruined Christmas for me last year. Was I couldn't go and get a coffee. I felt really upset about that routine being taken away from me. As minor as it sounds, it really threw me off. It's the fact that you are forced to socialize. It doesn't feel like you can go and take yourself away. I need to be able to go and sit by myself and decompress. I don't know if there's a better word for that. When you go, take your mask off, basically.
Yeah,
Go and,
give you space. Well, yeah, I think, yeah, to deregulate or to regulate yourself, give yourself that space and time. Yeah, I get what you mean, and like, I do get the same.
I need to be able to go and take space also. And I think this part of struggling with Christmas has caused me so much guilt and shame for so much of my life, because it feels like an ungrateful thing. But now I'm starting to recognize that it's actually the autistic traits in me. I struggle with gifts, which sounds dreadful, but I don't feel ashamed when I say it anymore. It's the overwhelming pile of presents and not knowing what any of them are going to be, and in front of people I'm so focused on acting happy that I don't know if I'm happy with it anyway. Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I can't actually focus on what it is, because I'm thinking, God, everybody's watching me and I don't know what's in this box. And I really don't like having clutter. I'm very particular about the things that I like or want. And I'm so lucky. Like my mother, she loves to spoil me and she buys me some absolutely wonderful presents. I think me and her have had a conversation where I've said, just if you want to buy me, I'd be happy without presents. Don't tell her I said that, because I do want like a magnetic nose strip this year.
Mm.
I would actually be happy with presents. One year I gave her a list of 5 things, small things. I said, do not deviate from this list. I said, you don't have to buy all of it, but do not buy anything else. I don't want anything else. And she didn't. It was the best Christmas I ever had, because I knew exactly what I was getting. And that sounds really spoiled, but it's not. If I didn't get any presents, I'd be fine.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you mean, because like sometimes it's that thing, having something they don't want and you do not know what to use with it, and sort of I get what you mean, and like you don't want anything that would want to go to waste.
Yeah, because then if I get something that I don't like or want, I tell you what happens is I've just thrown away. That this is how deep this runs as well. I got a hair bobble in a stocking from Father Christmas, okay? I don't like it. And I've had it for 2 years and I really don't like it. And every time I see it, I get this pang of, oh my God, I really don't like that hair bobble. And I just want to get rid of it or give it to somebody, but I can't because it was given to me. So I have to hold on to it. I have that feeling. I just got rid of it, by the way. But I have that feeling with every gift anyone ever gives me. Gifts from friends are very different. Friends tend to just give you like little bits, and friends know you very well as well. My friends certainly do. So gifts from friends, absolutely fine. But I think it's like with your family when you get a lot of things. And yeah, I think it's just more that situation of I don't want to be overwhelmed by gifts. I also struggle to remember to get gifts for other people on. Yeah, Christmas Eve is a nightmare for me. I'm literally like the useless husband kind of archetype character running around trying to pick up something in TK Maxx for everyone because I've been time blind. Christmas has arrived. I'm like, oh my God, I've bought 200 quid's worth of expensive wrapping paper and absolutely nothing to wrap up. How have I got here and done this? The whole thing is a nightmare. And then it goes on for ages as well. There's Christmas Day, and then you've got everybody that's alive on your family tree is going for a meal on the 22nd. Yeah. And they're just like, oh, and I'm just in this constant state of constipated, like frustration and horror until like New Year's when everyone goes back to normal. And then I'm like, and then I have a complete guilt and shame crash for January. It's awful. I'm tempted to leave the country this year. I am, honestly. But yeah, it's hard. I find Christmas really hard. So, yeah, sorry, I've gone off on a massive tangent again. But it's the autistic traits, routine, change. It's hard to figure out because the autistic traits and the ADHD traits clash. So I love new and exciting, and I hate change.
I do relate to that because I do think that I probably do have ADHD myself, and it is something I've thought quite a lot over the past couple of years, especially with doing this podcast, because I always think, yeah, I can relate to so many different people's bits of conversations, and I think, is it just autism and dyspraxia? Sometimes I just think with listening to conversations and stuff, but I do think I do relate to a lot of what ADHD is.
Do you know what I think there are? Like, I think that we are all, you know how they say it's like a spectrum, autism is a spectrum, and
Yeah.
you know, people say it's like a line and you're either here or you're here or you're here. I don't think it's like that. Here's how I think it is, okay? I think it's, and this isn't me making something up, like I've seen them talk about the autism spectrum, but I'm gonna include more in it than that. If you imagine like my hand like this, okay?
Yeah.
And if you imagine that on each finger, there's a kind of a symptom of neurodivergence, okay? But imagine I've got like thousands of fingers, not just pathetic measly 5 that I've been lumbered with, okay? So you've got time blindness, for example, or you've got struggles with eye contact, or I don't know, whatever they are.
Yeah.
List them all. But if you were to do like a spider diagram of every single neurodivergent symptom, including dyspraxia, dyslexia, BPD, emotional dysregulation issues, depression, anxiety, the ADHD, talking a lot, hyperactivity, impulsivity, put them all on a big spider like this. And if each of those individual symptoms was a spectrum, as opposed to the spectrum of the neurodivergent condition itself,
Yeah.
we looked at ourselves as like a map of neurodivergent symptoms, and potentially you maybe align slightly more with the criteria for autism, and I maybe align slightly more with the criteria for ADHD. But I almost think, and I feel like you're going to agree with me, but you don't have to. But I feel like, having spoken to so many neurodivergent people who are ADHD, autistic, dyspraxic, dyslexic, nobody's the same. You sit a group of
Yeah.
autistic people together, you sit a group of ADHD people together, we're all completely different. And yet we all have these similarities in certain areas. Me and my best friend, we have the same, kind of symptoms, as it were, but it presents completely, we are completely different people. And I almost think that neurodivergence itself is one kind of overarching diagnosis that we have. And then we just lean more towards the symptoms of one particular kind of branch of that tree. But ultimately, I think we're all crossing over with each other. I think I've got some dyslexic traits sometimes. I think, oh my gosh, am I a bit dyslexic, or am I a bit OCD, or am I a bit autistic, or am I a bit this, or am I a bit... And when I say it to my psychiatrist, he's like, yeah. And now, he's never said it explicitly. And obviously my autism needs things to be said explicitly. But I think what he's saying when he's, yeah, you do have all of those traits, is he's saying, you're neurodivergent. You are experiencing you aren't just experiencing what is classically ADHD, but you are a person. And for me, when I look at my friends and I reflect on the people that I attract into my life and the people that I'm drawn to out and about, I always seem to find out that the people that have really clicked in my heart are neurodivergent, not necessarily ADHD, but there is something so connected about all of us neurodivergent people, no matter what the particular label is that we at the forefront, whether it's ADD, ADHD, autism, whatever, wonderful rainbow list of, neurodivergent conditions. Oh my God, why is this making me emotional? We're such special people. I'm so drawn to neurodivergent people, but I
Yeah.
do think that I think that we're like the UK, but hopefully like less divided, like Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, England. But imagine that, but like everybody really likes each other. Because I think that we do. But neurodivergence is like the Great Britain, United Kingdom part, primarily British, then English, then Welsh, or whatever. Imagine everyone actually wants to be British. See where I'm going with that? It's like that. We're all the States, but ultimately we're American. It's that kind of energy, I think. But everyone likes each other. That's a bad example.
It's hard to do where you're coming from, because when you think of it, it is very complex. So neurodivergence works, and because a lot of people are getting diagnosed with autism, ADHD, and then some people may have dyslexia diagnosed with it, some people might have or whatever, it does get a bit overcomplicated. Because it's, myself, I do have issues with going to sleep, and I can go with some different conditions. And the mental health stuff of it, even though I can understand the concerns of people who think they are their own conditions, because I can understand the point of, if you said, oh, I think I'm a bit OCD, because I understand the concerns for like an OCD person, how would they would feel if they somebody who might not really present fully with OCD, whether that would be misleading or not. Where I do feel it is very complex, and I don't think we can scratch the surface to be able to properly explain and define it yet.
Yeah. 100%. And I think having do you know, this is going to sound random for a second, but do you know astrology, where people say, oh, I'm a Sagittarius, but I've got a Pisces rising, okay? Which is, so me and one of my friends, we always joke, and I always say, I'm ADHD with an autistic rising, and she's autistic with an ADHD rising. And we laugh about it like that, because I think we identify largely with one of those conditions, but then we see the influence of the other condition within us. And I think the benefit of having obviously the label, the condition, having like one primary focus is for the support and the treatment element of it. For me, having ADHD, and that is my primary diagnosis, and that's the one that I identify with, etc., helps me to with all sorts of things, finding resources, even things like with sobriety, connecting with other people with ADHD, looking into how the impulsivity impacts it, how the novelty seeking impacts it, how the dopamine seeking behaviors impact that. So that's really helpful. And that is different to say if you don't have very many ADHD traits, but you've say got dyslexic traits, how you might approach things or what your kind of primary concerns are. But overall, and I think this actually is a part of the process of understanding myself and growing as a person, is that more and more I'm just seeing myself as a neurodivergent person with a really special and interesting brain and outlook, with things that I'm so proud of as traits of myself and things that I want to improve on. But I'm really moving into this like self-acceptance. But I really identify with the neurodivergent label. It makes me feel connected to a whole community of people.
Yeah.
I'm a big empath, and I love connecting with what is it about the ADHD autistic connection? Why do we love each other so much? I love autistic people so much. It's like I can spot them in a crowd.
It's probably because the whole thing where you've probably seen a lot on social media. You see a lot of people using the ADHD thing off describing themselves because there is a common overlap in a Venn diagram. A lot of people who get diagnosed autistic and ADHD. That's where I started to see myself fitting into that. And so I think that's where you're going to see it linked. And because like you do have those elements of kind of sense of justice, stimming, sensory things that can do maths to both bits of the Venn diagram, really.
Yeah. I am attracted to people, and I'm talking about in the sense of the word of wanting to be near people who are autistic or ADHD. It's so comforting to me. I think one of the really beautiful things about neurodivergent people, like generally speaking, is that we are like naturally quite authentic, even if we're going through phases of trying to figure out ourselves or whatever. I think we are quite loudly who we are in a way, and I admire and respect that in so many people, that kind of just being yourself. I think as well, I really want to say this because this is something that I've been thinking about. I'm a really personal development focused person, always have been, always have wanted the best for myself. And I find that like a lot of neurodivergent people, I think because we're faced with problems that are more noticeable to us because we have to operate in a neurotype, we are, I find, more likely to push ourselves and try to grow as people. I'm not talking about growing, forcing ourselves to fit in an environment that doesn't work for us. I'm talking about chasing our own purpose and finding where we fit and wanting something better for ourselves than just to stagnate. So that's something I really admire about just like neurodivergence generally.
Yeah, because I think I see like this idea of neurodivergent being bent in terms of if you see a lot of us identify with different sexualities and different agendas from the typical binary. I think from your point of seeing us as might not be able to quite loud in it who we are and being able to explore that and personally develop. And I think that level of unmasking allows that into social elements as like there's lots of social model to neurodivergent means, and I think that kind of fits in it.
Yeah, I agree. I think wonderful seeing neurodivergent people, and I think we live in kind of an exciting time for it because I think it's becoming more recognized now. People are starting to understand it in themselves more. So instead of, I think throughout history, neurodivergent people have been incredibly isolated and felt just bad their whole lives. And now I'm not saying that's like completely gone or anything like that, but I think that we are starting to learn about who we are and the benefits that we have. I think society actually is starting to learn from us. That's what I think is coming next. I think this is like the neurodivergent revolution. I think that the workplace is already changing. It's still rubbish, but I think that as time goes on, I think that people will start to recognize the fantastic, unique gifts that neurodivergent people have, and that actually the workplace is crap for everyone. Like, and it's so exclusive and exclusionary and unpleasant for people. And actually, I think that we are going to be the people that kind of teach the world a better way to be. I think that's what's coming next, if I'm being honest. I don't think it's even, I think we've done our bit. We've been learning to fit in with this hot mess. I
Yeah.
think next up, I think the world is gonna continue to shift as it has been into, I hope anyway, I hope that's where it's going. From the state of things at the moment, it might have to get worse before it gets better. But I don't know, I just have this sense that might be where it's going.
Like in terms of a few more conclusive points, in terms of as you referenced, you're like really drawn to personal development and you're drawn to being a stronger empath. But do you think that what made you want to be like involved in doing confidence coaching and making confidence coaching driven content?
Yeah. Can you say that again? I'm so sorry. My bloody
I I was just asking that in terms of being like into personal development and being a strong empath, I guess that's what drew you to confidence coaching and developing social media content and stuff like that.
So the thing with coaching neurodivergent people and coaching confidence, I am an empath. I'm a very sensitive person, and I've got a weird knack for being able to, I think it might be ADHD actually, impulsivity. I'll throw myself into situations that make me scared, make me anxious, but I'll still go through with it. And that's something I've learned. It's incredibly difficult for neurodivergent women to do that. Obviously, I tend to work with women. And as an empath, as a highly sensitive person, as a neurodivergent woman who cares about her personal development and her career and doing well in a world that isn't designed for women, never mind neurodivergent women or neurodivergent people, I was very drawn to helping. I love helping people and I am an empath. And something I noticed actually quite early on in my career was how much confidence the women surrounding me lacked and how it was holding them back in their career and how they weren't going out and asking for things. And that maybe that's the sense of justice in me. I thought that's so unfair. She should be having this, she should be having that. And it was something that I more naturally had as a kid. It wasn't that it was 100% easy for me to be confident all of the time, but it was definitely easier for me than I could see for other people. I was more willing to throw myself into the furnace in a way. But my kind of sensitivity helped me to really empathize with how they were feeling, and I could see that I had really nurtured this skill myself, and that was something that I could help other people with. And then, obviously, more recently, I've gone through such a drastic change in my life. And now I would say I'm even more authentically confident in who I am now than I ever was before then, anyway. So I feel like I'm even more of a position to be able to help people now. I do think we're always a work in progress.
Yeah.
We should help each other whenever we can. But now I would say I'm even more in a stronger place with that anyway. It's like I understood it before and I had it before, but then I saw how it can crash. Anybody can crash, no matter how confident you are. Things can just, your life can change, the rug gets pulled from under your feet. And I've had to rebuild my confidence from scratch again. And that process actually has been, in my opinion, like divine. It's been really difficult, soul crushing, but it's proved to me again you can build confidence. You can ask for the things you want. You can go out of your comfort zone. Everything will be okay. And actually, the only person that you should try to be is your authentic self. And yeah, and the personal development thing, I'm just so passionate about that. I don't know if that's just like a personality trait of mine, but I want a happy life. I want to be, life isn't always perfect. I'm not aiming for a perfect life.
Yeah.
but I want to find my place in this life, and I want to align myself. I want to be in the right place personally for all of the things that I want and need to be attracted to me, and for me to end up where I'm supposed to be. So yeah, I'm self-aware, I'm focused on what I'm doing. I'm trying to work on the inner critic. I think we all have that inner critic. But I'm a human being at the end of the day. I am confident. People often look at me that don't know me, for example, and they go, "Oh my God, you're so confident and charismatic and all of this." And to other people, it seems like it's no effort for me whatsoever, but it is sometimes. I have taught myself for it to come naturally, but I am a human being at the end of the day. And that's what I think is important when you're coaching with people, is to have that relatability. Like, I'm not just this demigod walking around, like, not phased by anything in life or whatever. I don't know.
And I
But you know,
guess maybe to a certain extent, like from when you were doing it, maybe a few years back, started out, when you were going through your own challenges yourself, do you think that to a certain extent, yeah, like at points within your confidence coaching, you have like to an element, mask that confidence, and without maybe autistic on ADHD masking has played a role within your coaching without you subconsciously knowing for some time, and you might have reflected on it more recently.
yeah, I'm actually so glad you've asked this, because when I went to that ADHD talk and I had that huge identity crisis, this is a bloody while ago now. It's over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. I left there suddenly realizing that my confidence was a mask. And it felt like such a big part of my personality, being confident and being social butterfly. I left and thought, oh my God, this is something that I manufactured to protect me. And it's not who I am. I'm not actually confident. I'm actually really deeply insecure, and I'm crumbling apart at the seams. And I've just realized that this is something that I've created. My best friend told me this is like at the start of my journey, really. She said, when I was 14, I went into school one day, and before that, I was very shy. I was a very shy child. And I went in one day when I was 14, and there was other stuff going on in my life that was very difficult for a kid of my age. But I went into school one day, and she remembers me just saying, I'm bored of this, I'm going to change. And she said, you just did. She said, you were a different person. She said, you went from being shy and awkward to just this different person. And I'm actually really, I can't believe she can remember that. I don't remember that. But I know around that age, things really changed for me. And now I understand that was part of my development of a mask. And what I would say is, reaching burnout at work, having all of this kind of huge change go on, having the identity crisis, having the sobriety issues. I am so grateful for all of that in the past couple of years, because now I sit here and I don't think my confidence is a mask anymore. I think it was, but I relearned how to be confident in the most authentic way. Before, it was, okay, I've basically learned how to fake it till you make it. But I think I was still in the fake it part, but that was like very deeply ingrained in me. And then in the last 2 years, I think I might have made it. I don't think
Yeah.
I'm like fully there. I think confidence is a muscle. You got to keep working it. Everybody is insecure about something or other. We all have ups and downs. I'm neurodivergent. I have an inner critic. I struggle too, but I live my life authentically as myself in a confident way. And then I also honor those days and times when I don't feel confident as
Yeah.
well. But I feel now, I feel awake, I feel alive, I feel proud of who I am, proud of the work I've put in. And so when I step out into the world now, I do think, yeah, this is me. I'm happy to be here. I'm proud of who I am. And so that feels very genuine. And I think going through that whole process, the crash and burn, what is it? The phoenix out of the ashes process. I think that has changed everything for me. And I feel like I truly understand it now.
Is there anything else you wanted to say they haven't had a chance to say already?
I think things I just want to say for anybody that's watching that or listening that is maybe at a point where they're thinking, okay, there's stuff in my life I'm not happy with, or feeling dissatisfied with where they are, whether that be around substance issues or just coming to terms with your neurodivergence or just struggling with yourself. There are kind of several things, really. One, you have to start everything from a place of kindness to yourself and wanting the best for yourself. And that's the first step in kind of everything, really. So there's that. Number two, if you are struggling with substance abuse or anything like that, I would highly recommend having a look at resources for online meetings if you're afraid to go in person, 12-step programs. Anybody that's interested as well can like DM me. I'm always happy to talk about it. Sorry, the dog is snoring right now. Can you stop snoring because that's really loud? Yeah, so looking for meetings online is really key if you're struggling with substances. Feel free to reach out and DM me. What else was I going to say? Sometimes this year has been a really difficult year for me and in the most amazing way. And what I really want to say is sometimes when it feels like you're at the absolute bottom and you're in a really crap place, that is usually the start of moving into a new transitional period of your life. Things can change so dramatically in a period of months. You have to be patient, take it day by day. I will take a phrase from Alcoholics Anonymous because it's really, I didn't really get it at first, but now I do. People would say, I'll take another 24. I didn't get it. I was like, what's that mean? It means I'll take another 24 hours. I'm going to do another 24 hours. That's as far as you need to look forward. You don't need to look forward weeks, months, and years. You just need to go, I'll take another day. I'll take another day. And that's all you focus on, one day at a time, small baby steps, and your life can completely change. Focus on who you're surrounded by, what you're surrounded by, if you're feeling loved by your surroundings and the people in your life. Difficult changes make for a happier life overall. So yeah, I'll take another 24. And I hope you guys do too.